Have you ever found yourself, just stuck in that job search maze, feeling like you're completely blindfolded?
Or maybe you're on the other side doing the hiring and wondering why it's so hard, just so consistently difficult to find the right person, even after like dozens of interviews.
It's such a common frustration, isn't it? And that's exactly what we're digging into today. We're calling it the hiring gap.
Yeah, this idea really helps explain why the sort of traditional ways of hiring just fall short so often. It causes headaches for candidates and companies.
Right. And what's really interesting about our discussion today is where the insights come from.
Exactly. This isn't just, theory from a textbook. It's from real-life excerpts from a community event. We heard from a genuine expert in talent acquisition.
Someone with years of experience sharing what they've seen, what works, what doesn't.
Really grounded in actual, sometimes messy, real-world hiring challenges.
So that's our goal for you listening. We want to give you a kind of shortcut.
Yeah, help you understand the surprising problems with standard hiring.
And give you some solid, actionable strategies, whether you're the one looking for a job or the one trying to build a team.
So you can approach it all with, well, a lot more clarity and hopefully be much more effective.
Okay, so let's get into it. Why is hiring often so broken?
Well, to really get the hiring gap, we have to start there. And maybe the biggest issue, surprisingly, is the unstructured interview.
The most common kind, right? Just sort of chatting.
Pretty much just an unstructured conversation. And the data on this is quite stark.
Stark how? Like, how bad is it?
Well, think about this. A big study, Schmidt and Hunter back in '98, found these kinds of interviews predict job performance only slightly better than chance.
Slightly better than chance. So like flipping a coin.
Almost exactly. Imagine spending all that time interviewing just for a result that's barely better than random guessing.
That's kind of depressing, actually.
It is, and it's not an old, outdated finding either. Google, with their huge resources, did their own study, the Rework study in 2013.
And what did they find? Same thing.
They confirmed it. Unstructured interviews, not great predictors. But they also looked at those famous, quirky Google questions.
Oh, yeah, like how many golf balls fit in a 747 or something?
Exactly those. And guess what? They found those questions had zero predictive ability for job performance.
Zero. Not even slightly better than chance.
Nope. Actually worse than chance in some cases. It just goes to show how easily we can mistake, maybe, cleverness or a certain type of answer for actual potential.
So why are unstructured interviews so bad then? Is it just bias?
Bias is a huge part of it, definitely. But it's also inconsistency. You ask different people different things, how can you possibly compare them fairly?
Right. You're not comparing apples to apples.
Not at all. And that leads to another big piece of the puzzle.
Which is?
The people doing the interviewing often haven't been trained properly.
Really? You'd think that would be basic.
You would. But SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, found only about 23% of managers have actually had formal interview training.
Wow, only 23%. That's surprisingly low.
It is. And then you have to ask, okay, what does that training even involve for the ones who do get it?
Good point. What does it cover?
Well, based on what we know from big companies like, say, Unilever, Google, Amazon, a lot of it focuses on compliance.
Compliance, like legal stuff.
Exactly. Mostly about avoiding illegal questions. Are you planning to have children? What's your religion? That kind of thing. And maybe some general bias awareness.
Okay, so it's more about avoiding lawsuits than actually making good hiring decisions.
It often leans that way, yeah. It's less about equipping managers with the skills to truly assess talent and potential effectively.
So what happens then? If they're not trained, what do?
They default. They fall back on what they've experienced themselves as candidates.
Yeah. Okay, so they ask the questions they were asked.
Pretty much. Which leads to those really common, often quite unhelpful questions.
Like, tell me about yourself.
That's a classic.
Yeah.
Or, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Guilty as charged. I definitely asked those early in my career before I learned better. I just went with my gut feeling,
And that gut feeling, as we just discussed, is the thing that's barely better than flipping a coin.
Right. It connects back.
It all connects.
Yeah.
And this reliance on gut feel points to even broader systemic issues in hiring.
Such as?
Well, fundamentally, many hiring decisions get made emotionally first. That gut feeling again. And then people try to justify it afterwards with logic.
So feeling first, justification later, not facts first.
Often, yes. And layered on top of that, the roles themselves are frequently poorly defined from the start.
What do you mean poorly defined?
Like, the job description is vague, Or the manager hasn't really thought through what success actually looks like day to day, week to week, so everyone's kind of guessing.
Candidates are guessing what's needed. Managers are guessing who fits. It sounds messy.
It can be very messy. And think about the odds for candidates, too. The Financial Times reported that typically only, 1 or 2% of applicants even get an interview?
Wow. So you fight through those odds, get an interview, and it might just be a coin flip based on poorly defined needs and gut feelings.
It paints a pretty bleak picture for the conventional approach, doesn't it?
It really does. So, okay, if the standard way is so flawed, how do people break out of this? Where's the opportunity here?
Right, this is where we shift gears. And this is where the expert insights from that community event become so valuable.
Tell us about the expert. What gives their perspective weight?
Well, this person has been in talent acquisition for over 20 years. They've personally conducted something like 12,000 interviews.
12,000. That's a lot of interviews.
It is, and hired over 1,000 people across different businesses, including companies that had successful exits. So this isn't just theory, it's deep, practical experience.
Okay, so definitely someone who's seen what works and what doesn't firsthand. What's their main principle then?
Their core message is a direct challenge to that whole hire fast, fire fast idea that you sometimes hear.
Ah, yeah, the sort of churn and burn approach.
Exactly. And the expert was really clear. That just doesn't work. It's damaging. Instead, the guiding principle is hire with clarity.
Hire with clarity. Okay, what does that mean in practice?
It means you absolutely have to define what success looks like, what the criteria are, before you even think about interviewing anyone.
Because if you don't.
If you don't, as the expert put it, you're basically setting people up to fail. And you, as the manager or company, will inevitably be disappointed.
It's like that analogy you use trying to hit a moving target blindfolded.
Pretty much. You need to know what you're aiming for. So instead of saying we need a good communicator,
You need to define what that means in this specific role.
precisely. Does it mean clear written reports, confident presentations, active listening in team meetings? You need that level of clarity.
Okay, so clarity is key.
Yeah.
How does this translate into advice for, say, candidates navigating this?
For candidates, the big shift in thinking is you need to be interviewing the company just as much as they are interviewing you.
Right. It's a two-way street.
Uh.
Or it should be.
It absolutely should be. Don't just be passive answering questions. You need to probe them.
What kind of questions should candidates be asking then?
A really crucial one the expert highlighted is, how do you define success in this role?
Ah, that forces them to articulate that clarity we were just talking about.
Exactly. It tells you if they know what they're looking for. And beyond asking questions, candidates need to know the company's problem, the challenge they're hiring to solve.
And then position themselves as the solution.
Yes. Clearly articulate. Here's your problem as I understand it, and here's specifically how my skills and experience can solve it for you. Demonstrate that value.
Makes sense. It's proactive. What about answering their questions? Any specific frameworks?
Yes, the expert recommended the SOAR framework for answering behavioral questions.
SOAR, what does that stand for?
Situation, obstacle, action, result. It's a way to structure your answers to show your thinking process, not just list achievements.
Okay, so instead of just saying, I improved sales,
You'd say, the situation was we had declining market share. The obstacle was outdated marketing materials. The action I took was to lead a project to revamp them based on customer feedback. And the result was a 15% increase in qualified leads.
got it. It tells a story and shows the how, not just the what.
Exactly. And one more quick tip for candidates from the expert: networking. Focus on getting second-degree introductions.
Meaning,
Don't just ask people you know if they know anyone. Ask them who in their network they could specifically introduce you to who might be relevant. It's more direct.
okay, lots of good advice there for candidates. Now let's flip it. What about for the managers, the hiring side?
For managers, the mantra is basically define, design, hire, in that order.
Define first. We covered that, getting clarity on what great looks like.
Yes. Define great before you start, and shift your focus. Don't just think about skills or tasks listed on a resume.
Focus on what instead?
Focus on the mission of the role, the specific outcomes you need that person to achieve, and the core competencies required to get there.
Mission, outcomes, competencies. MOC. Okay, so you've defined great. What's the design part?
Design the process to actually find that great. This primarily means designing and using structured interviews.
Back to structured interviews again, making them consistent, comparing apples to apples.
Absolutely essential. It helps remove bias and leads to much better, more objective decisions. You need to see hiring as a critical act of leadership.
And interviewing itself as a skill.
Yes, a skill that needs to be learned and mastered, not just something you do off the cuff based on gut feeling.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, what about companies that maybe didn't do this? They already have a team that was built using unstructured, unclear methods, a bit of a mishmash.
The remediation question. Yeah, the expert and stress this directly. If you've got that kind of mishmash team,
Yeah.
the answer isn't just to hire more people hoping to fix it.
Okay, so what is the answer?
It requires going back to fundamentals. It's about having a core discussion around mission, vision, values, and culture.
So a foundational reset almost.
Pretty much. You need to figure out where you are now, honestly assess the team, define where you want to go, and then rebuild from those first principles.
That sounds hard, especially to do internally when you're in the middle of it.
Extremely hard. And the expert strongly suggested getting outside help for that kind of foundational work. Because, and I quote, doing it internally takes a really long time.
Huh. Okay, fair enough. Blunt, but probably true.
He called the process something like a founder's route virtual. Basically taking the business back to its core principles, like when it first started, but with the knowledge you have now.
Like hitting reset, but with experience, to guide future growth and acknowledge that, yeah, sometimes you outgrow your old ways of doing things.
Exactly. It's a natural part of growth, but you have to consciously address it.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together then. What's the big picture takeaway?
I think the core message is pretty clear. The way most hiring is done, the sort of conventional approach, is genuinely broken and causes a lot of frustration.
For everyone involved, candidates and companies.
Right. But the good news is there's a better way. By moving away from just relying on gut instinct.
Which we know is basically a coin toss.
And moving towards a structured, clear process that starts with really defining what you need. Well, both sides stand to gain a huge advantage.
So whether you're out there looking for your next role or you're a manager trying to build a really high-performing team.
You now have some insights, some concrete ideas that can genuinely change how you approach it.
It's not just about filling a slot or getting a job. It's about making better connections that actually lead to success. Real success.
More intentional, more effective connections.
So it leaves us with a final thought to chew on, doesn't it?
Yeah, something for you, the listener, to consider.
If bigoting a business, building a team is always going to be a bit messy. And if outgrowing old methods is just part of evolving.
What first principles in your own work, your own career, maybe need redefining or reevaluating? What could you approach with fresh clarity starting today?